So the main part of this session today will be presented by Emma Davis-McIntosh from Aneurin Bevan University Health Board. Good morning, Emma.
Hi, Patrick, and thank you, and hi, everyone. I just want to start really by introducing myself. I recognise some of the names on the call, so you will already know me from being out in the community supporting wellbeing activities. For the last, I've lost count of how many months it's been, to be honest, but I've been more involved in the COVID response, and I now kind of sit in somewhere between the COVID response and getting back out to support community wellbeing. So my interest really is getting community centres back up and running, getting activities back up and running, but in a really safe way. And just to say that I know there's quite a few volunteers on the call. You know, you're under no obligation at all to get these community centres running. If you don't feel safe or you don't feel that you can run something safely, then there is no obligation to do so. This guidance is just, if you want to do so, then to make sure that you do so safely. Just to start off generally with the definition of a community centre, it's not actually defined in the regulations, but we all know them as the community centres that run many activities in the community, and they may be church halls, they may be Salvation Army halls, they may be called community centres, they may be called community halls, but there's no actual definition, but generally we all know what we're talking about. Do you want to move on, Patrick, please? And the guidance is all very formal, and apologies for the very formal language that I'll be using as I refer to this guidance. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is your responsibility. It is something that you need to take seriously, but you also need to be mindful that there are organisations and services out there to support you to do this. So if it feels like a heavy weight on your shoulders, then please ask for some help. So as a management committee, initially your responsibility is to make sure that the building is safe, and to take all reasonable measures to ensure that the appropriate safe distancing can be maintained within people. That the size of your venue and the size of the individual rooms is really your starting point for how you identify what things can be run in the building. You also have a responsibility to make sure that you minimise the risk of exposure to the virus, and ensuring that your hygiene and cleanliness measures are in place, and providing information as well to people who enter the premises or work on the premises. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we do that with some of the signage, etc. I'm going to reinforce the point that the guidance is there for us all to interpret, and it's really important that you're familiar with elements of the guidance. I will ensure that I quote the guidance rather than use my own interpretation, because there are elements of the guidance that you may interpret slightly differently to me. But here are the links where you can find all of the guidance online. Some of it is quite complex and legislative. The top link is probably the easy read bit, which I would recommend that you have a look at yourselves. And just to remind you again that you can open, but you don't have to. So the first place you really need to start is with your venue health and safety. You know, we're all talking about COVID, we're all talking about hand washing and sanitizer and distancing, but the first place we need to start is the things that we always do to make sure that your building is safe for people to enter, particularly if it's been closed for some time. There will be other things that need to be done to make sure that it's safe, such as flushing the water through, etc. So once you've done that kind of thing, you then need to look at the size of your building and determine how many people you can safely accommodate with the new social distancing rules. That is your starting point. Just because you can have 15 people, if that is only if you have a big enough space. If your building says that you can only fit 8 people in a room safely, then 8 people is your maximum, not 15. But alongside the size of the hall and the various rooms that you use, you need to think about the pinch points. Where do people enter? Where do they exit? Where are they likely to congregate if you allow that to happen? Outside toilets, etc. Ensuring that you limit the number of people that wait in certain areas. So the pinch points are crucial, as well as the size of the rooms. And then once you've established what your maximum is, your maximum may be 30. I was in a hall the other day where they could probably get 30 in there safely, but you can't do that. The maximum is 15 people indoors, but that excludes children under 11 or people running the session. So you may be running a bingo session and you can have 15 people attend. But then on top of that, you can have your bingo caller and potentially somebody to provide refreshments. So, but that has to be proportionate. You can't have 15 people in the bingo session and then another 10 people supporting the delivery of that session. That wouldn't be considered proportionate. And when it comes to children under 11, the legislation doesn't actually set a maximum. That is something for you to consider when you thought about all of the other things that you need to put in place to minimise the risk. And then if you're working outdoors, then the maximum of 30 people applies, excluding children under 11 or persons supporting the delivery. I'm conscious that we're probably going to be talking at you for most of this session. So if you do have any questions, just raise your hand or pop something in the comments box. Or if you're not sure of the functionality, then just take yourself off mute and say that you have a question. I want this to be as interactive as possible, really. So we talked about the venue and we're still on that point in terms of what you need to do to prepare to get it open again. And we've, all of the health and safety checks that we would normally do, but also making sure that it's clean and it's tidy. So the cleanliness of the building is the first thing that you need to think about, and to make sure that everything is safe around the building so that there's nothing that could be a bit of a hazard. We've talked about this already, actually, in the previous slide, but yeah, I've covered all of this stuff. But once you've done all of that kind of thing, at that point, when you are confident that your building is safe and you can make it COVID secure, at that point, then you need to discuss the arrangements with each individual building user. We talked about the inside of the building a lot. You do need to consider queue management outside of the building. So you may not own the outside of the building, and so there is a line to be drawn between where your responsibility starts and finishes. You cannot be responsible for what people do on the way to you or on the way from you. But one of the things you could do is potentially have markers outside your front door just to show where those 2 meters are so that people can queue safely. And you can consider whether your car park layout helps or hinders social distancing. So I know I was parked next to somebody on Saturday and I wanted to go around to the passenger side, but if I'd done that and then they got out of their car, then that would have put them quite close to me. So just thinking about whether any of that car parking layout is a hindrance to social distancing, particularly if you have people perhaps that need a little bit more space as they get in and out of their vehicles. And at that point, you complete your risk assessment. There is a risk assessment document online on the health and safety website as linked there that is quite comprehensive and takes you through all the points bit by bit. That should be relatively simple to go through. And then once you've completed your risk assessment, you need to make sure that you know what you need to do to put those measures in place. So if your risk assessment refers to signage, then you need to ensure the signage is there. If it refers to hand sanitizers, you need to make sure the hand sanitizers is there. So you've done your risk assessment, you know your buildings, you put all the things in place, and then you need to consider all of your cleaning regime and your hand washing facilities. So if you were to hire your building out 2 or 3 times a day, for example, you need to ensure that there's adequate time between each session for the cleaning to take place. And that doesn't have to be hours, it could be 15 or 30 minutes, depending on what your arrangements are. And also you need to be clear on whether you are delegating that responsibility to the user or whether you will undertake that cleaning yourself. So you may decide that the user that uses the space in the morning is responsible for cleaning before they leave, and then the second user can come in safely. You may also decide that the first user cleans after them and the second user comes in and they clean before they use the space. So you can put all of these things in we'll talk a little bit in a moment about terms and conditions with user groups, but you can pass on that responsibility to those user groups. And then if you do need any signage, then we have all the drafts, and we can provide printed copies and things if you need signage. But it is really important to continue to prompt people as they come into and move around the building of the things that they need to do. There's some more signage there, and I particularly like the wash your lyrics one. So it basically, I know everybody sort of talks about happy birthday in the 20 seconds, but you could have a sign above the sink, which I'm not sure what song is on there. I think it's a Queen one, and somebody could be singing along while they're washing their hands. So just to try and put a little bit of humour into this very serious situation, because it all is getting a little bit tedious and people are very fatigued by it. Just one point on face coverings, because there was a point on the previous slide, a reminder to wear face coverings. The legislation does say in community centres people need to wear face coverings all of the time, the exception being if they're doing exercise. So even though when they're sat down they will be 2 meters apart, maintaining social distance, the requirement is that they do keep their face covering on throughout the whole time. And then there's some images really just to show you, they're mainly health board premises of how we've put social distancing in place. Often, I mean, they are fixed seating, but you could move chairs, move tables, or if you can't move things, then you just tape them off with the crosses, etc. And then the directional arrows to try and encourage people to go the right way. Also sinks, if you've got 3 or 4 sinks in a line, then taking out those sinks that are in the middle of 2 so that people don't stand in the bathroom next to each other. I certainly have seen queuing for the toilets as in the workplace where I've been in the health board premises is sometimes where it breaks down slightly. So ensuring that I don't know, I've seen things where people can switch something on the door if they've entered the toilet, because if there's only 2 cubicles and a really small waiting space, then until you open that door you don't know how many people are in there. So you need something outside that controls the entry and exit to that really. Okay. So that's the building. That's your responsibility. You checked out how much capacity you have. You identify your maximum. You set in place your cleaning regime. You've got your risk assessment and all your signage up. Then it's thinking about what activities can you have in the space and what user groups can you bring back. I've checked this with a number of colleagues, including environmental health colleagues, and our interpretation is that you can do pretty much everything you were doing before. So you can let your craft groups come back, you can have your bingo, you can have your exercise classes. The only exceptions are around the high risk activities, such as singing, woodwind instruments, and potentially drama where people are shouting. but I'll talk a bit more of that in a moment. Do you want to move on, Patrick, please? Yeah, so we all fall under the categories, but those are the groups that can run activities, but generally anyone using a community centre falls into one of those categories. And just a reminder, in case perhaps you're thinking you're going to have your lunch club coming back on and you're going to have a bit of a glass of wine at Christmas, no alcohol must be consumed. But that's generally, we don't do that kind of thing in community centres anyway. So most of the things are fairly simple, arts and crafts activities, bingo, etc. People coming together for coffee mornings. But something that is a specific activity may be covered by a separate piece of guidance. So I touched on the singing, woodwind instruments and drama. Yeah, Linda, do you want to ask a question? Are you on mute?
You got me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just ask, are we going to be able to see these screens and these links after this so that we can follow up any links and any information?
Yeah, so the PowerPoint will be shared with you later, and where you see the blue underlined in the presentation, if you click on that, that'll take you straight through to the appropriate link.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of specific activities, the singing and all of that kind of stuff is covered by the first link. I've also had a quick look this morning at the Welsh Male Voice Choir Association, which has got some useful, they've broken it down into quite an easy read thing if you are looking at running singing or choirs. I would advise against it. But the guidance, I'm just going to read from it now. It says that singing, chanting, shouting, or the use of wind instruments are considered to be high-risk activities and should generally be avoided, especially indoors, even where physical distancing and face coverings are used. If these do take place, there must be extensive mitigating actions. So if you do come across a group that is interested in getting singing or wind instruments or drama back up and running, then please encourage them to get in contact with us, and when we can look at a bit more deeply into the guidance. Suzanne, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please, Emma. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wanted to clarify about the maximum amount of people in the venue. Obviously, we're a church. It's quite a big building, as you know. And we've been following the Church in Wales guidance, and I'm pretty sure it says that it's obviously dependent on your size of your building, but I didn't think there was a maximum of 15.
I've not looked at the church's guidance recently, but the community centre guidance is definitely 15.
Right.
The reason I checked and double checked and triple checked last week, because I visited a hall last week where they were extremely keen to exceed that maximum, and they can't. It's 15 plus the plus anyone running the session.
Okay, so at church then it would be a maximum congregation of 15 plus children under the age of 11 plus the pastors.
Yeah, I guess. But what I will do, Suzanne, is read the church guidance again, just in case that's slightly different, because this guidance is for your church halls.
Yeah.
So I haven't reread the church guidance. I'm expecting it would say the same thing, to be honest. But I will reread that guidance and check. But this guidance here we're referring to today is when the church is being used for church hall type activities.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to need to double check as well.
Yeah, I'll double check because I know we've had a number of queries, but largely from community centres about this, because you know it does seem. I'm going to use the word unfair. It does seem unfair. We were working to 30. Some spaces have got this space to be able to do that, but the maximum is 15.
Right. Okay. that does have implications for us.
Yeah, I know. I'm happy to pick up a conversation with you after,
Okay.
and see what we can work through in terms of looking at the other guidance.
All right, thanks, Emma. Thanks.
No problem. So yeah, the other things referenced on that slide there relates to sport and recreation. So if you have exercise classes, and also childcare settings has its own specific guidance, and youth services specific guidance. And if you do have groups that want to talk about any of those things, more than happy to dig a bit deeper into that guidance. Okay, do you want to move on, Patrick? So yeah, we've kind of touched a little bit on this. So you're a management committee, your building is safe and secure, you've got your risk assessment in place. These are the kinds of things that you'll need to be talking to your activity users about. And what do they have in place, because they will need their own specific risk assessments, and they will need to refer to their own specific guidance. And you need to think about who's responsible for the cleaning, as we've already discussed, and then who's responsible for keeping a register of users. And we're going to move on now to I think the next slide is the test, track, protect bit. Yeah. So I just wanted, this isn't specific to community centres, but I just wanted to provide some clarity on how the system works, because to be honest, most people that I speak to at the moment don't absolutely understand how the system works. So the reason you complete a register of people coming in is if someone is then positive and needs to refer back to the people they were around. So if someone does test positive, then they will be contacted by a contact tracer, and in Wales they will receive a call from that specific number. It won't come from anywhere else. And then they will be asked where they've been and who they've seen 2 days prior and 5 days post symptoms. So if I developed a cough today on Monday, then they would be interested in who I saw yesterday and who I saw Saturday and what I did during those days. And if people I saw fall within the definition of a contact, they will be told to isolate for 14 days. Do you want to move on, Patrick? And this is the bit where actually, if you do everything right, nobody within your community centre is going to be a contact. Because just because you've been in the same room as somebody doesn't make them a contact. A contact is somebody who lives in the same house, has had face-to-face contact at a very close proximity, has been within 1 metre for 1 minute or longer without face-to-face contact, has been within 2 metres for more than 15 minutes, which might be 3 times 5 minutes, or has travelled in a small vehicle. If you are doing everything correct in your community centre, nobody in that building would be a contact with somebody else. So if you do have a positive case, then you do still need to provide that register, but everybody is kept as safe as possible by the measures that you've put in place. And I just wanted to emphasise that point, because I've had some conversations this weekend with some volunteer groups that I'm involved in, where people are under the impression that if somebody is positive within a room, that everybody then needs to isolate. If they are 2 metres apart throughout, then they don't. So I just wanted to kind of reinforce that point, really. Linda, yeah.
Yes, just to follow up on that. I mean, we have been open for a while, so I'm just trying to make sure we've covered everything. In terms of keeping the registers, we as the Village Hall Committee have contact details of every hirer who is regularly hiring our hall, or who's hiring our hall. But we make it clear to them that it's their responsibility to have a register of each of their classes, so that we don't know who's in the building, but we know the main hirer and they know who's in their class. Is that acceptable?
Yes, that's absolutely acceptable. You've clearly stated who is responsible there, and you've delegated that responsibility, and that's probably makes it easier for you to comply with GDPR. Yeah. You don't need to know, the organisers need to know of that activity, so yeah, that's fine.
Good, thank you.
And then as long as they're keeping those records and they're retaining them for 21 days and storing that information in compliance with GDPR, then that's crucial. And just another point, because this is something else I was talking about on the weekend, the app doesn't replace the need for that register. The app is there to help people understand whether they've been in close proximity to somebody. The Test, Trace, Protect team doesn't get access to any of the information on the app, so the app is a separate tool. And then just one last thing from me, because again, I understand that people can be a little bit concerned about what will happen if they have a positive case in their centre. If you are doing everything as we've described, then you really have nothing to worry about. The only reason that environmental health may come along is if somebody has made a complaint that the guidance hasn't been followed, or if they notice through the TCP system that people, 3 or 4 people that have been at the same session on the same day at the same time have tested positive, then that will trigger them to come and ask some questions. But they are there in a supportive role, unless there's been a complete breach of the guidance where you're having 30 people and they're all drinking alcohol and no compliance whatsoever. They're there, if you're doing your best, they're there in a supportive way. And they will potentially issue a premises improvement notice if they think that you really could be doing something better. And then worst case scenario, they could close you down. But I wouldn't anticipate seeing that at all with community centres, because I know that everybody's trying their best to do the right thing. So yeah, that's everything from me on that. I just wanted to touch on some of the questions that were sent in previously. So in terms of activities, I've said that pretty much everything you were doing before, subject to the exceptions of singing, etc. I don't know how many community venues in Torfaen have already opened. TVA might have a better idea. Bingo nights, yes, bingo can continue, subject to the 15 maximum. Yeah, so I think we've covered all of the other questions that were sent in previously. So if anybody has any questions on what I've just covered, then ask them now or get in touch with me later. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next bit. Oh, Linda, yeah.
Sorry to be hogging this a bit, but
It's okay.
Going back to where you were talking about face coverings, that is sort of not what I understood the system to be, the situation to be. The way that we've set it up is that entering or leaving our premises, they must be wearing face masks and doing hand sanitizers and so on. In the foyer and the toilets and the corridors, they must wear face masks. But we understood that once they were in the room where they were separating, social distancing and doing their class, they could then remove their face mask, whether that was many of the various exercise classes that we have, or whether it was the children and motherless organised tots play type classes. We've told them that they can remove their masks once they're in the class, but they still have to social distance. Is that not right then?
So I got and I think it might have been Suzanne actually, that I had a very I had to dig deep into the guidance on this one, because Suzanne made this query. We went through this one, didn't we? And exactly as you've just said it, Linda, would be my initial interpretation. When I scratched under the surface of the guidance and spoke to environmental health, that's not what we concluded. We concluded that the guidance was telling us that face coverings needed to stay on. But what I will do is I will dig into that guidance again, because maybe I've missed something, maybe I've interpreted something differently, maybe something's changed. I will dig into that guidance again, and I will come back to everyone that's on this this call, and I will clarify, and I will quote exactly what I find. But in terms of a rational response, Linda, I think that's absolutely rational what you're doing. I'm not sure that the guidance is as rational as us.
Okay.
Is there another hand up, Patrick? Can you see?
Yeah, I think Dan.
Richard. Yeah, well, it's not Dan, it's Richard. Richard Sutton, one of the attendants in Woodland Road. We're all here together. Yeah, 2 meters apart.
Okay.
just one question I'd like to ask is with regard to people who come in and they're not wearing face masks and they say that they're face mask exempt or what have you. If we can have some clarity and guidance around how to deal with such people or talk to such people or what have you.
Okay, so there are face covering exemptions. Not everybody has to wear a face covering, and the reasons that they may choose not to wear a face covering could be for health reasons, such as a respiratory condition, or it could also be that they're previous victims of violence or trauma, and they have an association with having their mouth covered, which brings back unpleasant memories. They're not under a legal obligation to carry any kind of evidence to say that they're exempt. They may choose to carry an exemption card, which can be printed down from the Welsh Government website, or they may choose to wear a lanyard or a badge, but they're under no legal obligation to explain themselves to anybody. I know that doesn't help at all. And then that leaves you to make your own judgment as to whether people are.
I think my comments come because you know, I walk around town and I see people who quite a high proportion of people in shops and what have you aren't wearing face masks. Probably I guess more than people who have got a genuine exemption. These people possibly could be coming into our centres, and so basically we don't confront. We just let them come in and don't say anything.
Yeah. And actually, this came up again in something I was involved in on the weekend, and I've agreed to look at it as to whether you might be within your rights to have some kind of policy around it. But then I would be concerned that we were pushing away legitimate people. I think it's a really difficult one, but people can choose not to wear them for the reasons I mentioned, and they're not required to carry any evidence.
I did read somewhere that the centre had the right to refuse admission if they so decided. I don't know whether that's the case or not. Not that we want to. I'm just trying to clarify, that's all.
No, absolutely, and I think it's a difficult one. But I've agreed to have a look at that issue, so I will look at it on your behalf as well, and come back to you with anything I find, if that's okay.
Oh, no, that's great. Thanks very much. Cheers.
No problem.
So before we go to the funding slide, thank you very much for all that, Emma. We are also joined this morning by Emma Waldron from WCVA. Emma, have you got anything else to add to the conversation so far?
Morning, everyone. Yeah, just to say thanks very much, Emma, as well. I thought that was a very, very good overview, and pretty much everything that you said there, I completely agree with, really. Just to give you a bit of background with me, so I've produced some guidance on community centres reopening. So I'll add that link to the chat pane as well. Just a few points to reiterate. So those hiring the venue must also undertake a risk assessment, and centre managers should also be in receipt of that risk assessment as well. One other point to note regarding places of worship. So I was able to have a very quick look at that whilst Emma was doing the presentation, and the guidance does state that using places of worship for community engagement activities and hiring rooms to other organisations is ultimately covered by this set of rules. So it is the cap on 15 for that. Regarding face coverings, my understanding is that they do actually have to be worn in community centres at all times, because community centres are considered as public premises. That is, unless exercise is being taken place. And then the other point I sort of wanted to just reiterate is Emma's key theme throughout her presentation, which is just because you can open your community centre, it really doesn't mean that you have to. Obviously, as centre managers, you need to feel confident and reassured that you can carry on delivering your services and protecting the community as well. So just to reiterate that important message. That's it from me.
Thank you, Emma. And now we talk about funding for your venues. Thomas.
Yeah, so at TVA we've got a few pots of funding available at the moment. And myself and panel members have actually been looking at what we could do with remaining funds. So, as is listed on the PowerPoint, TCBC and the SAF grant, we're looking at providing this grant, or offering this grant out to community venues across Torfaen to help them purchase PPE and all essential equipment like signs, sanitizer stands, all that, just to ensure if they are willing to open, they are following the correct procedure and they're going the right way about it. We have got another grant also from Comic Relief, which is part of the BSCF, just more specific criteria. And with this pot of money, we do suggest perhaps advertise this to more of the groups that are using your facilities more than yourselves, because there's more of a theme that they have to follow to ensure that the project is in the right place. So as long as the project or the group can fit in with Children Survive and Thrive, gender justice, a safe place to be, or mental health matters, they'll then be able to apply for this particular grant and go from there. If you would be interested in receiving this funding, you can contact me. What we'll do first is send you a funding inquiry form to find out exactly what you're looking for and find the best pot for you. There's 2 pots of funding available from WCVA also, a Third Sector Resilience Fund, which is based on organisations to continue a long legacy project, not just to support a period of delivery. And there's also a Voluntary Service Recovery Fund, which is to continue on from the original VSEF, providing the essential support to organisations who are carrying out an activity to ensure that they can still carry out the activity provided in the government guidelines. But if you want to know more about that, again, please feel free just to contact me on that.
Richard or Dan, you have your hand up?
Is that a new hand or?
A new hand, or was that a historical hand?
No, that's from before, sorry. I'll put it down now.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to volunteering then in Torfaen.
Okay, yeah, so just to touch upon Thomas's funding information there, is that we're not just isolated to those funding opportunities to support you with. If your inquiry fits a different theme, that Thomas would be happy to try and help you to develop an application to be able to apply as well. In regards to volunteering, I think it's crucial to, so important to acknowledge the fact that many of you managing these venues are volunteers, and this is an additional strain, additional responsibility, that if you do choose to open your venues, that you can ask for more help. There has been a mass amount of people interested in supporting during this time. I think this may have changed slightly due to people returning back to their usual roles. However, there are people out there willing to help. So if there are any specific roles that you have within your centre that could ease pressure from yourself or your committee or your volunteers, then we've got a dedicated volunteering officer that you may be aware of, which is Callum, and he'd be happy to discuss any volunteering needs, support you with maybe creating a volunteer role, and do the induction process with you to make sure that you are fully supported throughout. So that option is there, that although there may be people who have already experienced putting these measures in place, or maybe can take some sort of administration support away from you, so you can focus on making sure that your venue is safe for the community. So the option is there for you, so please get in touch.
Thank you, Vicky. And also, it's all about letting people know that you're open. Now you can use all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's also TVA now. If you're a venue, we can promote your events on our website, on our social streams. Also, you can register with InfoEngine, which is the third sector platform for Wales. And Dewis is very similar to InfoEngine for third sector, but it's also for health and wellbeing services too. And then on to supporting vulnerable people, Emma.
Yeah, this is just a bit of a plug for the kind of work that I'm used to doing. And I think it is really important to recognise that some people out there in the communities are not feeling at their best at the moment. In terms of isolation and COVID specific stuff, the supporting you to stay safe link there takes you through to a leaflet, Torfaen specific, for anybody who's isolating and needs support. But also, I think in your context, you may notice people that have not returned to your committee or activity. Particularly many older people in the community have kind of withdrawn and may be struggling with confidence on getting back re-engaged in the community. We have got a Wellbeing Champions programme if you want to get involved in terms of knowing about all of that kind of stuff that can support people like that. But also if you are concerned, if what I'm saying now is making you think of someone in particular, then please get in touch with me directly, and I'm more than willing to provide information on the kind of support that might be available to help people out.
And there's also financial aid with the British Red Cross Hardship Fund. Now, if you want to find out how you could be a referrer for that fund, we can give you all the information here from TVA. There's also the £500 self-isolation payment scheme with Torfaen Council and Welsh Government. And on the subject of further support, the British Red Cross offers support with their national COVID-19 support line. And on our website, there's a list of food banks available in Torfaen too. So if you do have any further questions about today, all the contact details are there for Torfaen Voluntary Alliance, that's us, for Emma as well with the Marin Bevan University Health Board, for Torfaen Council as well, there's Paminda, and via our social media platforms at TVA Wales. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them over right now.
Yeah, just one final thing from me. I was going to type it in the chat, but I'll say it instead. I am more than happy for anybody to contact me directly if you've got any queries on any of the things that I've said today, or I'm sure between myself, TVA and Paminda in the local authority, if you want us to come and visit your hall and talk through some of the specifics with you, I am more than happy to do that. And work with colleagues to do that. So please just get in touch if you want a bit more advice and support.
So I think with that, we can call this session complete. Thank you very much for attending. If you do have further questions, all the contacts are there. We will be sending this out in due course today, and have a great Monday. Thank you.